Well, folks, it's T-minus 2 weeks to C10 in the city down in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're trying to get the cruise control installed on Dale the truck. So if you guys have been following along my YouTube channel very long, you know that there's two things that I absolutely despise when it comes to working on older vehicles. One is brake lines. I absolutely hate doing brake lines, well, and fuel lines, same diff. The second thing, wiring. Don't like it. I'm not a neat guy when it comes to wiring. And I like crimp connectors and Scotch clips and all that type of stuff. And I know all you guys make fun of me online for doing that. And there's lots of guys that make fun of other guys for doing the same thing. We got to get this cruise control installed on Dale the truck. And probably about 90% of it is, well, it's wiring. It's getting all these wires run. It's getting the new switch, the turn signal switch with all the cruise control stuff on it installed through the steering column. So we got to tear into that. And it's a lot of reading. The biggest thing that I've found with these Dakota Digital cruise control kits is people not following the instructions. And I'm not an instruction follower. Dang it, I like to take those instructions and just turf them, but you got to read them, because if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to set it up, you're not going to be able to make it work. 1,500 miles one way is a long ways to go in an old truck without cruise control. So we want to get this thing mounted. I was out here last night just kind of reading through the instructions and looking at some of the bracketry and where we're going to mount this thing. Let me show you what my plan is, and you guys can tell me down in the comments below whether it's a good plan or not. But by the time I get it installed, it'll be too late, because I'll record it today and put the video up next week. You guys ain't gonna know the difference anyway. Let me show you what I'm working on. So this piece here is the actual driver of the unit. This is where everything connects to. This is where the cable is that's gonna drive the throttle. And it comes with a bracket that you can bend and manipulate all you want. I've got it bent up here at a right angle, because my plan is to, right where those 4 dots are, we're gonna mount it. It'll get mounted like so on the fender. And then this piece will kind of sit up here like so, up out of the way. And we have direct access to the firewall for the wiring. And we've got a loom here for the headlights and all that stuff going already. So we're gonna run parallel to that. And we'll have to get ourselves a second hole into the firewall and then run into the fuse panel, because we got to tap into a few things like the activation switch, which is now going to be the turn signal switch. We've got to have access to the brake pedal switch, or the brake light switch, because it needs a signal from that. If you tap the brake, it'll cancel the cruise control. And we also need accessory power, 12-volt power. We can ground it out here. We're going to have to tap into, out in the engine bay, are a tack signal. So once we get the thing mounted, we will connect it to the FiTech on the throttle actuator lever. And there's a bracket for that as well that comes with the kit. And then we've got to start looking at our wiring, get all of our wiring tied in. And we've also got the vehicle speed sensor, which goes in front of the speedo cable on the transmission. So you just disconnect it, plug in the VSS, and then screw the speedo into the other side of it. That's going to give us our vehicle speed sensor, our pulse. That's going to tell the vehicle how fast we're going, so that it can activate and deactivate. Anyways, I'm going to get this box mounted, and then we can start routing our cable and start doing this godforsaken wiring. Let's get to work. So we've got the control box mounted on the fender very securely, and we're going to run the cable kind of down underneath the brake booster and to come up here. And one of the things that I had to mess with was trying to figure out how I was going to get the cable from the cruise control to run in line and connect here the same as the actual throttle does. So here's what I come up with. This is the bracket that came with it. It's got the square notch in it for mounting it. So what I've done is I've painted it black, and I've made the hole bigger just down below the square. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let's see if we can focus in. So that the throttle cable goes through it. Then we can mount the cruise control through the hole that's there. And once we get this bolted down to the throttle bracket, both cables will come and they'll meet right here at the same point on the throttle actuator here. So I've got it painted. It's still a little bit tacky. We're waiting for that to dry up. And I've got a couple of small bolts that will mount this in to that throttle bracket. Then we can put our cable through and make the adjustments necessary to get the cable length where it needs to be activated. And the instructions tell you exactly how to do that. So I guess we're just waiting for paint to dry. Literally, I'm going to continue reading through some of those instructions. But once we've got that cable mounted and the proper spacing to the throttle actuator, then I'll be right back and we'll show you what that looks like. Then we've got to get into the wiring, which I hope we just simply put that off till tomorrow because I don't want to do it tonight. Trying to engineer how to do this. I lied earlier when I said, the wiring was the worst part of this whole job. Well, finding a place to mount the module and a place how to figure out how to mount the cable there's a little bit of thinking going on there, and I'm not much of a thinker. Anyway, paint, dry, beer 30. Okay, so we've got our little adapter for the throttle on down here, and we've got our little adaptive 3-ball chain or whatever they call it, and it's coupled to the cable here. We've got the cable securely mounted on the bracket. The bracket is securely mounted to the other bracket, and we're ready to do some wiring now. Although I think I forgot a step, which might involve putting a lock nut up against there so that that doesn't stretch or pull through. I don't know. I'm going to double check my instructions and see what it says. But when I did this, I also wanted to make sure that down here, my bolts, when they went through this bracket, didn't interfere with the travel of the throttle, and it does not. So I think we are 100% ready to start wiring and get a lot of that tidied up, because there's some wires that's got to go to the tack, one's got to go to power, but I think other than the vehicle speed sensor, everything else has to go inside. When it gets time for the vehicle speed sensor, that's when we've got to get it over to the shop, get it up in the air so we can access that speedo cable on the transmission. So when I come back, we're going to have hopefully a majority of the wiring done. That's not for tonight, that's for tomorrow. So we'll be right back. So it didn't take very long to realize that wiring was the least of my troubles. We've still got the activation switch, which is the turn signal on this truck, to get those wires fished down through the steering column somehow, which we're probably just gonna use a coat hanger or a fish and just kind of pull them down through. But we've got to get the steering wheel off. Luckily, I just had this off not long ago, and it pretty much slid right off. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. So let's get the steering wheel out of the way and see what we got to do to get this installed and those wires fished down through the column. Okay, it was at this point that I realized I didn't have the tool that I needed. So we're going to use the tools that we have. I've had this little U-shaped thing, or Dad had it over in his toolbox at the shop. So I went and I grabbed that, and it wasn't quite enough spacing. So I had some change here in my cup holder. We took a couple of toonies, which are $2 Canadian coins, and spaced it out. So now that I've got that tightened up, I should be able to get in here with my pick and pry that little clip out of there, just like so.
A few moments later.
That'll make you sweat. So now that we've got that lock off there, this metal plate, which is spring loaded, slides off. We'll set that over here. You take your horn button right there, set that down there, and we might even just take the spring out so it's not in the way and it's not moving around. Okay, so I just slid the turn signal switch or lever back into place. As you can see where it goes, there's a little Phillips head screw that goes in here, and yes, I've got zip ties holding my plastic together because it's cracked, it's broke, and it does the trick. I can still, you know, move it down and move it up once it's bolted in there. So we're going to pull this one out, and then the new one basically just slides in its place, but we've got to get those wires on the back down through the steering column, which means we've got to find a path. We can run our clothes hanger down, which is probably going to be way down in this section here, and come out down on the other end below the dash where you can't see it. And I've got my coat hanger fish that I use all the time for wiring. We're going to shove that up through from the back side to see if we can, you know, find a path, and then we'll heat shrink our wires to it, pull it down through, and then we can fasten this in place and do the reverse process by putting all this back together. Okay, so I've got everything cleared out underneath the column. We've got the 3 screws that hold this switch in place, and I've got my lead up in here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take the wires that's got to go down through. We're going to kind of hook them into here, and we're going to start by using a little bit of tape, because I think we should be able to make that work. So we've got some electrical tape here, and we're just going to wrap that around that lead and try and make this as small as possible. There's surprisingly a lot of room down in there, especially once we get this turn signal switch out of the way. So we can just kind of take this and start pulling that lead for that switch down through very carefully, because we don't want to pinch anything. And just like that, we're through. And I just realized I gotta do it over again because I didn't route the wire down through the turn signal hole here on the side of the stock. Dang it. At least we know we got it done. So we're just gonna yank that lead back up and through there, folks. Just like this. You don't want to pinch that in there. And okay, now we've got practice and expertise. That pretty much makes us professional. We've gotten that far. Now we can reverse everything that we just did by putting the turn signal switch back in place, and with our little press thingy, get that snap ring back on for the lock ring, horn ring, all that stuff. Just kind of reverse taking it all apart. I'm not going to show that. And then this will be in place in the side and screwed into place and ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to get that done. Be right back. All right, so now it is evening number 3 for the cruise control swap. We're only getting in about an hour and a half to 2 hours a night, just fiddling around. We've got to find a way to get the wiring through the firewall, which means we've got to drill a hole, and finding the proper place to put the hole. And it's got to be big enough so that we can get these 2 plug-ins. So basically we only got to get one in at a time. So we got to get a hole a little bit bigger than that. So I've got my step bit and I've got it marked at the size that we need, which is, I think it says 11/16 on there. And I've got 2 possible places that we can drill this hole. So one, I was thinking right directly below the hood release cable, but there's a plug there that's kind of in the way on the inside. We might be able to get over this way a little bit, but also we could probably go directly below the fuse box. And then I was thinking we could go up here somewhere beside the speedo cable. The problem with any of those is that we've got to check the inside first to see what obstructions might be there. So let's go inside. So as we come inside, there's that plug that I was telling you about, which is right below the hood release cable. We've got some space like right here underneath the fuse box. But the speedo cable, which is way up in there, is going to be hard to get at. We've got some room on the side and even below it. So we might be able to start our drilling from the outside and come in. So let's go back out and see how much room we have around that. I like that area better because it's up high and you won't be kicking it. Down here, it's right near the edge of the carpet. And well, our headlight dimmer switch is right there. So it's a possibility maybe to be getting up in there and kicking it around. We don't want to do that. So I'm thinking probably right up in that area somewhere, just down, and it's to the left here, but it'll be to the right of that speedo cable. So let's go take another look. So down and to the right puts us right about here. I think that's plenty of room to get the drill in there and drill back that way. And if you're worried about water infiltration in through there, I do have a grommet kit, as well as I believe somewhere here. Yeah, the kit comes with this little package of we used to call it dum-dum. I don't know if they call it dum-dum anymore. It's like a little pliable, rubbery substance that stays pliable to seal up that hole once you get wires through there. So I'm going to grab that drill. We're going to try and drill through there. Getting through the metal is only part of the battle. We've still got that insulation barrier on the other side that we're probably going to have to cut through as well. No big deal. So anyways, we'll mark a spot. We'll drill a pilot hole, and then we'll get started. And as you can see, there's the hole for this side. And on this side, we almost made it through where that little hole for the insulation was. But anyways, we got our hole. We're gonna start running some wires inside here, get them grommeted, get them sealed up. And then the last thing we gotta do is get that vehicle speed sensor on the transmission, and we should be able to start testing this thing out. So I'm gonna start poking some wires through there, finding out where everything's gotta go, and we'll go from there. So the grommet's installed. We've got all of our wire kind of loomed up here, and we're following a factory loom, which goes over here to the headlights, and it's got tucked up in behind here. There's another one here, and then tucked in behind the bracket. And all we've got is just the colors coming out of the box. And at some point, we're gonna get rid of some of these Scotch clips, because this is for the lockup torque converter. It's getting power from the wiper motor right here for now, which is actually pretty cool, because when you're driving down the highway and you run into some rain, all you do is turn your wipers on and you lose your overdrive. Pretty simple, huh? That's pretty cool. Hopefully we don't hit any rain on the way down to Atlanta. We probably will, so we're gonna fix that as well and just clean up some of that wiring there. Everything else from here, with the exception of the vehicle speed sensor wiring, is done. Once we get that hooked onto the transmission, we can run those wires up and connect them. They've got to actually connect to a wiring harness on the outside of the box here. And everything else has to be done inside, up underneath the dash. So time to go contort ourselves up underneath the dash and see what we can get done for all the necessary wiring. Okay, so we're slowly coming to a head here. This plug-in right here is our switch, our activation switch, which is right there. This is going to plug in to this 4-pin connector here. Then we only have 5 wires left over that we actually have to find a source for. So the blue wire is the tax signal. The gray one is your vehicle speed sensor. And then you've got these two over here, the red and the purple. The red goes to the hot side of the brake switch, and the purple goes to the cold side, or the negative side. Then we've got the brown. And the brown has this little lead on it. This is our indicator. That's our actual switched 12-volt power. So when we get an ignition source, this is what's going to power up the system. And And if you guys know anything about these square bodies, there's a couple of different places that you can actually tap in to the fuse panel that's accessory. There's one here that says fuse. There's one over here that says it comes on with the lights. And there's another one up there, which I think is accessory, which is accessory 20 amp. So we just want to make sure that we're not going to be cramming too much amp because they are fused somewhere here on the fuse block. We want to make sure we're not pulling too much out of it. So I'm thinking this one over here is a fused 15 amp. We just want to make sure that it comes on with the key. So I'm going to grab the test light, hook up the battery, and make sure that that's where we're going to get a good source from. Albeit a mess down there, all the wires are connected except for the vehicle speed sensor. And that I've got to get it on the hoist over at the shop, which I'll do tomorrow afternoon. And we'll get that connected. We'll run that wire up and connect that one last wire. Just for poops and giggles, I went into the troubleshooting, which basically allows you to test to make sure everything is working the way it should. And so far, it is. Inside this little hole here, there's an LED. And every time you press a button on the activation switch, whether it's set or resume, it flashes to let you know it's making the connection. I also checked the brake light. By putting my foot on the brake pedal, it lights up the LED, letting you know you're getting the proper signal. Let me see if I can show you. So I'm just gonna hit the resume button, and then I'll hit the set button. And again, like I said, when I hit the brake button, I had to put my phone on record, lay it down on the thing, hit the brake button. The instructions specifically say you need 2 people, and I think that's the only reason why you need 2 people. One person to hit the brake, one person to check the light. Like I said, last thing we've got to do to make everything connected is that VSS, which again, I'll do tomorrow. And then it's just tidying everything up. Underneath here, everything looks good. Inside the cab, not so much. So that will be the final step, is, cleaning all those wires up, and then taking it out for a test drive and making sure it sets, it resumes, it cancels, not just with the switch, but with the brake as well. All the standard functions of a cruise control. So this will take us into day 4. Again, we're only doing a little bit at a time, a few hours. It's about all my back can take crawling up underneath that. And so yeah, it's pushing here about 20 after 8. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, so it's Friday afternoon, and I was able to get the truck up in the air and get that vehicle speed sensor plugged in. Sadly, I did not record any of it. It was pretty straightforward. Just unplug the speedometer cable, put this device in place, screw the speedometer cable back into it, and then run the wires up front. I did that, and I also learned a neat little trick. There's an unused plug-in under the dash that's 2-pin, and it's oval. Well, it matches the plug-in on the vehicle speed sensor at the module, that you can just cut that off, use that to wire your vehicle speed sensor into, and it just plugs in. I did that. All the wires are tidied up, and underneath the dash as well as under the hood. We're ready to take this thing for a cruise. See if we have cruise. Now that we're out for a drive, we're going to test this cruise control and see if everything works the way it's supposed to. So let's take a look. So cruise control is off. We're going to set it to the on switch, and then we just press and hold the button for a second. Take our foot off the gas, and we're cruising. And if I put it to accelerate, give it a bump, she comes up, hold on to it. Yeah, that works. And if I put my foot on the brake, well, that works too. For once in my life, I've done a project, I took my time, I read the instructions, and it worked the way it was intended to work. I'm pretty stoked about that. It's going to make this trip to Atlanta a lot better. So you see, installing a cruise control unit on your hot rod, street rod, stock truck, whatever you got, is not that bad of a job. If it's this style of unit like the Dakota Digital, gotta read the instructions. That's the biggest part of this whole thing. RTFM, read the freaking manual. Make sure you check out Dakota Digital. I'm going to leave a link for this exact kit in the description box down below. Take a look at it. If you're thinking about putting this system on one of your hot rods, I encourage it because it's not that bad. I did it over the course of 4 days, a couple hours each night. So maybe 4-5 hours tops. If you were working at it right straight, you could do one of these jobs in an afternoon or an evening, depending on how much you wanted to work. Not that bad. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give it an easy 4.5 to 5. You got to have a little bit of knowledge on your 12 volt, but you got to have a little bit of brain thinking to be able to mount those items in the right places to get things to work the way they need to. Got to have some reading abilities. You got to know how to read. Read those instructions. That's all I can insist upon. Guys, if you want to help support this channel, go down to the first link in the description box below. Get yourself some Olde Carr Guy merch. We got lots to choose from down there, from the original Olde Carr Guy shirts to the Focus on the Windshield, as well as the Dale the Truck shirts. When you guys buy that merchandise, it helps support the channel. I get a little kickback from those sales, and it helps go towards projects like this, projects like the new Crown Victoria, projects like the Yugo engine swap here. So make sure you guys are hitting that up. If not, that's okay. At the very least, you're watching this video, you're hitting the thumbs up, and you're hitting that subscribe button down below, because that means more than anything. You guys showing your support by watching the videos and being subscribed to Olde Carr Guy. Stay focused on the windshield, not the rearview mirror. I love you guys. God bless. Let's do it again in the next video.